The real way to weaken Hamas is to show that people who accept Israel's right to exist and pursue their grievances non-violently, as people in villages like Bilin and Nabi Salah have been doing for a decade now, that they get results. And tragically, this Israeli government has not done that.
Ben, do you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. I mean, the nonsensical idea that Hamas is firing rockets because somehow they're mad about imprisonments in the West Bank, or that they would stop firing rockets if Israel were to release the prisoners that it holds is nonsensical and idiotic. In fact, Israel has just done multiple prisoner releases with regard to terrorists vis-a-vis Israeli soldiers, and that has not seemed to quell anything with regard to Hamas. When Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005, that launched the election of Hamas and then further violence. The idea that if Israel makes more and more concessions, that will somehow not embolden Hamas as opposed to creating a movement against Hamas, that has not been proved by history in any way, shape, or form. Peter always finds a way to ensure that Israeli policy is somehow responsible for rockets falling on Israeli cities when it's really Hamas doing the firing.
I'm actually talking about Palestinians who protest non-violently in conjunction with Israelis. I mean, the irony to me is that actually Ben and Hamas have an enormous amount. Hamas doesn't believe that Jews should be allowed to live in the state of Israel. Ben has said that Palestinians don't have the right to live in Israel, West Bank, or Gaza because he's called for physically expelling all of them. So, in fact, the true moral and ideological partners, Ben, are you and Hamas.
Ben, go ahead.
That is absolute nonsense, Peter.
You didn't write that
my position on Israel was made clear in the 2013 column, and to call me equivalent with people who are murdering Jews is insanity. It's beyond insulting. And if there's anybody who's emboldening Hamas to kill more children, it is you, because it is your policies which have emboldened Hamas. They know that people like you are going to get on American television and talk about how the Palestinians are meek victims, and whenever they fire rockets, it can be justified by Israeli policy. Hamas celebrates every moment you're on television.
And is there any value to saying that there is some inherent bias, this sort of fear of difference, of something that seems other, and that it's valuable to sort of look at that and try to call attention to it so we can stop it?
How about combating actual acts of racism? How about singling out racism and then actually doing something about it, as opposed to doing this kind of Marxist newspeak in which we go through everybody's hidden actions? You know, I'm sensing a real sort of underlying, I don't know, racial bias to this whole segment. Robert, I find you to be racially biased. I find you to be insensitive, bigoted, and misogynist based on everything that you've said. It may be hidden. Maybe I can't detect it, but we all know it's there. So perhaps you should go through this program. At the end of the program, you will feel free, you'll feel better about yourself, and you'll feel more informed, because after all, that's the purpose.
It is completely and totally bipartisan, yet still Republicans in the House won't even bring the bill to the floor for a vote.
Richard,
that tells you right there, Larry, that they don't agree with the pathway to citizenship.
Why can't they vote?
Honestly, I have one question in all of this. Seriously, just one question. Why not just secure the border and then put a pathway to citizenship in?
Why can't those happen at the same time?
Why don't you answer my question instead of asking me back why? I just explained to you why they can't. Here's why they can't happen at the same time. As you secure the border remains somewhat open. People cross the border because they feel that if they get in before the deadline, if they get in before the border is secure, then they are somehow included in the pathway to citizenship. Of course I've read the bill. And not only have I read the bill, I've been watching what's happening on the border with tens of thousands of children crossing the border in anticipation of amnesty.
Wait, because we have
what do you think is happening?
There's no law right now. But in the Senate
no
bill,
law right
we
now.
talk about
You're right. There's no law against crossing the border illegally.
In the Senate bill, we talk about who qualifies for a pathway to citizenship, and those deadlines do not apply to those individuals that cross the border.
And how are you going to magically determine that, Richard? Do they have a magical
It's in the bill.
Right. They have
read the bill.
I've read the bill, Richard. Can you explain to me when you
haven't read it correctly?
when you determine who has crossed the border when? I was unaware that everybody who crosses the border has a barcode saying when they came across. Why are we mainstreaming delusion?
It's not delusion.
Why would you call it delusion?
Because Bruce Caitlyn Jenner, I'll call him Caitlyn Jenner.
No,
because
it's
that's
her. You're not being polite to the pronouns.
Because
disrespectful.
Okay, forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings. It turns out that every chromosome, every cell in Caitlyn Jenner's body is male with the exception of some of his sperm cells. It turns out that his brain structure is male. It turns out that he still has all of his male appendages. How he feels on the inside is irrelevant to the question of his biological sex.
I don't agree with that. I'm not on that train. I'm not on that train. She wants to be called she. I'm going to call her she. I just have a problem with the message and the messenger.
So well, I'm going to do two things. I want to reiterate what Zoe said, which is the bifurcation of the courage to come forward after a lifetime as a male and a certain kind of a male versus did she deserve this award? Listen, the awards, what are award ceremonies except an opportunity to catch some eyes?
Especially the ESPN.
So, yeah, it's like ESPN, well done, ABC. Yeah. They did exactly what their job was, attract eyes. They did it. That's what award ceremonies are for. But In terms of the science behind gender dysphoria, you're very familiar with that, Zoe.
Very familiar.
It's not about the chromosome. Excuse me, the chromosomes within our
both know
nuclei. Yeah, go ahead.
chromosomes don't necessarily mean you're male or female.
Gender.
With gender,
Gender
of course.
identity. Go ahead. No, so
especially, but even so, you have a thing like Klinefelter's syndrome. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
Would you like to discuss the genetics? Or
well, no,
what
no.
are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
No, I know. Well, but wait. To be fair, but to be fair, you're actually being kind of rude. And that's not fair.
I'm sorry, it's not rude to say that someone who is biologically a male is a male.
You just
someone who
called
is
me
biologically male.
Why am I
is
off
a
the
male.
rails, Mr. Shapiro?
You know, honestly, Pierce, you've kind of been a bully on this issue because what you do, and I've seen it repeatedly on your show. I watch your show, and I've seen it repeatedly. What you tend to do is you tend to demonize people who differ from you politically by standing on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook, saying they don't seem to care enough about the dead kids. If they cared more about the dead kids, they would agree with you on policy. I think we can have a rational political conversation about balancing rights and risks and rewards of all of these different policies, but I don't think that what we need to do is demonize people on the other side as being unfeeling about what happened in Sandy Hook.
How dare you accuse me of standing on the graves of the children that died there? How dare you?
I've seen you do it repeatedly, Pierce.
Like I say, how dare you?
Well, I mean, you can keep saying that, but you've done it repeatedly. What you do, and I've seen you do it on the program, is you keep saying to folks that if they disagree with you politically, then somehow this is a violation of what happened in Sandy Hook. And you have yet, I'd really like to hear your policy prescriptions for what we should do about guns. Because you say that you respect the Second Amendment, and, you know, I brought this here for you so that you can read it. It's the Constitution. And I would really like for you to explain to me what you would do about guns that would have prevented what happened in Sandy Hook.